Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Weil, and I'm the director of the Israel Museum for newish year and a bit. I would like to start with by saying how happy we at the museum are for the collaboration with the Wulf Foundation on the Israel Museum. The Wulf Foundation, an incredible organization, honors, celebrates, and fosters exceptional achievement in the science and the arts worldwide. We at the Israel Museum hope to bring, and that's a kind of our purpose, the cultures of the world to Israel, and the culture of Israel and the Jewish people to the world. And here we're doing just that, welcoming Wulf Prize winner Ríčard Long. Sir Ríčard, it's an honor to have you here. Long is an internationally renowned artist who received the award for redefining the possibilities of art making and transforming the parameters of visual art. He's a walker, and his art is created with a strong affinity towards nature, creating new paths of understanding both for art and nature. He won the Turner Prize in 1989. He has visited remote places in every corner of the world, and we are very glad that he came to Jerusalem, that for many is considered the navel of the world. We're also very proud that we have one of Ríčard Long's masterpieces, Turf Ring, from 1991, which is part of our contemporary art collection. We exhibited it most recently last year as part of our abstract expressionist show curated by our senior curator of modern art, Adina Kamian. And it was amazing because it really brought to life the earthy as well as the spiritual experience of the work. What you might not have known is that we actually had a shaman coming down from the ceiling into the circle without touching it, but it was a very nice combination. The Israel Museum has been and continues to be a beacon of multicultural excellence and a place where many voices and perspectives are promoted. In the same vein, this talk is an initiative by the Contemporary Art Department at the museum to bring highly influential and inspiring artists from around the world to the museum. We're also very excited tonight that we have 50 high school students from YASA, together with the 3 teachers here, so thank you for coming. Our evening will have 2 parts, the lecture of Ríčard Long on his work, which will be followed by a talk between the artist and our senior curator of contemporary art, Nirit Nelson, who told you before to sit down. So anyhow, it's a proud privilege and an occasion of great gratification that I welcome Ríčard Long to our stage.
Talk. You got one more talk.
It's my fault. I'm not good in ceremonies. So now we will welcome Reut Inoon Berman, the head of the Wulf Foundation. Thank you, Reut.
Not the head, that's just the Director General. So, dear Dennis Weil, the director of the museum, dear Tammy Manor-Friedman, the chief curator of the arts wing, dear Nirit Nelson, the senior curator of contemporary art, dear guests, and good evening. I'm very excited to be here tonight. It is not every day that we host an artist whose work is groundbreaking on a global scale. The Wulf Foundation was founded almost 50 years ago by Ricardo Wulf. The foundation awards the Wulf Prize to artists and scientists from all over the world for their groundbreaking achievements in science and the arts for the benefit of humanity and for friendship between nations. The Wulf Prize is one of the most acclaimed and respected awards in the academy worldwide. Through the award, we crown creation, discovery, and extraordinary excellence, the ability to break conventions, to innovate, and surprise. It's a great honor to have the Wolf Prize laureate here in Israel and to hear a bit more of their incredible work. They, the laureates, receive the Wolf Prize and we win their great works and creations. Sir ریچارد Long is awarded the Wolf Prize for refining the possibilities of art making and transforming the parameters of visual arts. We are happy and excited to have Sir Ríčard Long here at the museum, and we are very proud to have such a great artist as part of the Wolf Foundation family. I'm convinced that his lecture will be great inspiration for all of us. Thank you. He's the man.
I get a kiss. Okay, turn the lights down now. That's good. So when I was a young art student in the middle of the 60s, I had a realization that the world outside the studio was more interesting than the world inside the studio, meaning the environment, nature, fields, trees, rivers, had fantastic potential, to expand the language of art. So this is actually one of the first. This is almost my prototype work, rolling a snowball across some new snow, and when the snowball was too big for me to push, that was the work, and it seemed like the track was more important than the snowball. A few years later, I made this work, which was concentric circles made of segments of wood. So I took this work to Ireland, and I put it down in different places. So the idea was that the circles stayed the same, but every place I chose to put it down, it took up a new character and a new shape, because obviously every place in the world is different. So that was the idea about this particular work. This is a work from '68, England, 1968. A very simple idea. I wanted to impose a human pattern on top of a natural pattern, and the photo just records that idea very, very simply. I made the work by just removing the heads of the daisies. So obviously the work would just regrow in a couple of weeks. This is another work from that era in the west of Ireland. It's a traditional labyrinth, which it was a rock drawing that I saw in the museum in Dublin. But it's also a kind of a traditional design that some shipwrecked sailors would make on the beach when they were waiting to be picked up or rescued. It's called Connemara Dreaming. I first went to Ireland in 1964, I think. This is This is a circle in the Andes from 1972. This is the first circle of stones that I made. The first time I used a circle was in 1966, and it was a sort of sunken circle in my neighbour's garden. People often ask me why I use circles. The first circle I used was completely intuitive. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. But having made my first circle, I somehow realised the power of a circle that belonged to everyone and no one. So it had that wonderful power of a beautiful cosmic Platonic idea, which I can use in many different ways. Another circle from the west coast of Ireland. So you're probably realising that the sculptures I make on my walks are made from stones that are already there, and I just put them into a circle. So I don't really, I just use the stones of the place. So after I had made this circle, then I started a walk from the west coast here of Ireland to the east coast, across the country, placing a stone on the road at every mile along the way. So that work was called a walk of 164 stones, a walk of 164 miles, a line of 164 stones. A line in the Himalayas from 1975. It's never my intention to make permanent or monumental works in the landscape. So I like the idea that this is a beautiful, strong, powerful image, which as soon as I had taken the photograph, it would slowly start to disintegrate and disappear down the mountain as the glacier, like a river of ice and stones, move down. So again, it was the photograph records the sculpture in its ideal state. So a line like the circle is a constant theme in my work. I made a work, a walk. It's called a line made by walking in 1967, which was just a very simple sculpture, which is also a path, just made with my footprints. So that was the first walking work I made. And then that led to the idea that walking could be a medium to make art. So after that first line in the field, the next straight line walk was a walk of 10 miles, and the sculpture was represented by a line on a map. So that I began to realize that walking had a fantastic, gave me a fantastic freedom to make art in different places all around the world. And I could make work wherever my walking took me. So this is a line on Fuji. So it's like the circles. The lines stay the same, but the places change. I also like the idea that I can make a sculpture above the clouds. Very different from making a line of stones in the museum. So my work can be very remote, and maybe seen by few people, or maybe no people at all. And other times I can make my work in a museum. It's, both ways of working are completely complementary. So this is a circle in Africa on Mulanje Mountain in Malawi. So when I was climbing up the mountain, I had the idea to make a circle, and I thought I would make it of stones, because it's Africa and it didn't really have any ice and snow to break up the stones to make rocks. There were no rocks. So I made the circle of the burnt cacti that were burnt in the big lightning storms that play around the mountain. So often my original idea is changed by the natural circumstances of the place. I consider myself like an opportunist in a way. But I find this place gave me the opportunity to make the work you see in this photograph. So obviously I don't consider myself a photographer, but nevertheless having a camera to record an image, a work I've made in a remote landscape is very important for bringing that image back into the world and into the art world, so that you can see it in a book, or you can see it in the slideshow. So the work disappears, but the image of the work stays in the world, and can stay in the world in many different ways. There's a line in Scotland. So sometimes, if the stones are of the place are very heavy, I don't move them around. I just stand them upright. And that was sort of on a mountaintop, and then I might stay there for half an hour. And after I've taken the photograph, sometimes I will, if it seems appropriate, I will, before I leave, I'll put all the stones back again, so that the place stays the same. So you only know this work through the photograph you're looking at now. One of the pleasures of making walks in the wilderness and camping, having all my gear in one rucksack, is the pleasure of finding a new campsite every night. This work sort of combines the pleasure of my putting my tent up for a good night's sleep, and also the pleasure I get from finding stones around. So I put the stones I like around the tent I like. Finding the place to put the tent up is a pleasure, because often it means finding a place out of the wind, which is the most dangerous element in a way, and also near water, and sometimes near, if it's appropriate, firewood to make a fire. And then if there's some handy stones around, even better. Dusty Boots line from the Sahara. So sometimes when I'm making a long wilderness walk, by walking, I will make another type of walking, which is a sort of walking as ritual. So this is like a walk made inside another walk. So I like to think that my work is, in some ways, it's about beauty. It's the beauty of the image, the power of the image, and also the beauty of ideas. Meaning, maybe making something out of nothing, like the line made by walking was just footprints, like this work. So sometimes after I've made a sculpture like the one you're looking at, I sort of walk around it and find a good place to take the photograph. And often it interests me to take the photograph with something aligned on the horizon. So again, it's not just about the sculpture I've made, which is a circle of stones. It's also about the whole place, as far as you can see, as far as the eye goes to the horizon. So in the 60s, I was interested in alignments. That was, so the place of the viewer to the circle, to the horizon, or the rock stack in the middle. So it's about the whole place. So the originality or the creation in my work is not the circles I use, but the places I choose to put them in. So that's where the choice comes in. And as we know, all art is about choice. And my choice is about walking in remote, empty landscapes, finding beautiful places along the way. This is from the Swiss Alps. I've made many beautiful walks in Switzerland. Again, the disposition or the shape of the stones are really exactly where they were. So I've just pulled them upright. So the place really does make the sculpture. It's interesting for me, I have no idea what's coming next. So some years ago, I went with my wife, Denise, to, well, it all started with a very famous exhibition in Paris called Magicien de la Terre, and it was the first international exhibition bringing artists from all different cultures around the world into one big show in Paris. And one of my fellow artists was a great Indian artist called Jivya Soma Marche. And we were invited to spend some time with him in India a couple of years later, in Maharashtra, on his land. So why that exhibition was important was, for me anyway, was to realise that so many art of all different cultures was still using natural materials, and working on the ground. So in that exhibition, I had a big red mud circle on the wall, and then down on the ground were an Aborigine ground drawing, and then around the corner there's Navajo sand paintings, then around the next corner were Tibetan mandalas. So it was just one of those amazing shows where many artists, came together simultaneously, showing that, because obviously I'm growing up and I'm making my work in the context of the avant-garde Western art world in a way. There's many other art worlds out there. So this is another work I made in one of Jivya's paddy fields, where the field had been drained and the rice had been cropped. So and there was just all this like chaff left over. So again, I'm an opportunist, so I just use whatever's there. So I made this circle of with the chaff. So this is from South Africa. I made a walk in the Karoo for 2 weeks. So sometimes there's an interesting backstory to my sculptures. So the next day I was walking in this territory and there was a flash flood, so exactly where this work was, the water was up to my waist. So I made another photo work which I'm not showing you, called Flash Flood. That's another work from the Sahara. It's quite near where the Alexander the Great went to consult the oracle on the Libyan Egypt's border. I think he might have died there as well. It's called Midday Muezzin Line because when I was making it, I could hear the call of the distant muezzin in the far off distance. How are we doing for time? Oh, okay. So this is from a walk in Norway. It's called, it's called Rolling Stones. So again, I'm just using the opportunity of the place. So the very largest stones, obviously, they're already there. So to make my work, all I had to do was just roll a few extra stones towards the big ones to make this particular work. So everything I do in my art is what I can do with my own energy. The snowball drawing, the snowball track stops when I couldn't push the snowball any further. These stones that rolls by hand. If I walk across Spain, for example, it's my feet that take me across, and it's how many days it takes me to walk and no one else. So it's all about my own engagement and physical capacities, capabilities, strength, or no strength. So sometimes I might come to a mountaintop and like all the energy has gone into actually climbing the mountain, and then I might just make a small cairn of stones at the top with the rest of my energy. That was a beautiful walk I made in South America, amazing continent. That was Aconcagua Circle, because again I've lined my circle up with the summit of Aconcagua. This is another walk in Switzerland. So again, I've been walking on the footpath, and then I've decided to make my own line following the line of the footpath. So some years ago I had a chance to go to Antarctica. I went with the guide because it's a dangerous place, and you're roped up and you carry everything with on a sledge. And it was me. So I had one guy with me who he was a sort of expert. Is a great authority on snow and ice, and anyway, so one of the bits of equipment were like a big snow shovel. So if it was windy, we'd have to. We made in about 20 minutes. He'd make all these snow blocks around our tent, protect the tent in a blizzard or something, and so I just used his snow shovel to cut these blocks of snow to make my sculpture. So it was exciting for me because first thing I had to do was to put some skis on and learn how to ski a bit. So most of that trip was like spent falling over. So I have a very good friend, a Swiss artist, who has worked a lot in Niger. So this was in his sort of like oasis garden in Agadez, and he had lots of guys to help him make his work. He's a sculptor, Not Vital from the Engadine in Switzerland, and so he wanted me to make this work on his. He himself had made a tower to watch the sunset, so this picture was taken from his tower. So these are adobe bricks. So this is one of the, this is the pavilion this is the Sao Paulo Biennale from, I don't know, 25 years ago. And that was a sort of sort of like a limestone slip that. So I made that by with the watering can. Quite quickly, and I can't just do it with your eyes closed and no mistakes. And here's the sister work. So this is the Box Hill Road River from the London Olympics. So the backstory of this was that I only had limited time on the road to make it because the cyclists had to be training on the road. And so I had to make it in the middle of the night, just by the light of the headlights of one car at one end and one car at the other end. And also we had to wait for a dry night, which took a long time. And just one day before the race started, we did have a dry night. And one of the conditions was that the sort of like the paint that I had to mix up especially had to dry before dawn because the cyclists had to train on it. So that was kind of compared to my usual way of working, it was quite a complicated and nerve-wracking work to make. It's the biggest audience I've ever had. So that's another road walk in the wild west of China. Road stone line. So this, okay, about some months after the tsunami in Japan, they asked me to make a walk along the coast where the tsunami came in, and then to make an exhibition in Aomori in the big museum. So that's me up on a scaffold making it one of my mud works, which I haven't really shown my mud works much in this particular slideshow. But that also on the brown wall, it shows a typical example of my text works, which is another whole category of how I record my walks. So quite often I make like a text work which tells the story of a sculpture. Most of the work you're seeing tonight is I'm showing you photographs of sculptures, but I also tell stories of my sculptures in my text works. So just quickly, so the mud works, I like the idea that the top half of the image is made by me, and then gravity does the rest. As in here. So I'm interested in many different types of cosmic forces in my work. I've made walks that reference the force of gravity, or the force of rivers, the force of the wind, the force of geological force. So chance also plays a big part especially in this type of work I make. Because and I'm interested in the power of the overall image, but then there's the cosmic variety of all the different splashes and the micro details, which is not unlike nature itself. Slow hand spiral. So I've used mud for many years, but that's another story. not for tonight. That's a show I had in the Hamburger Bahnhof. So the big mud circle is from my the local. I come from Bristol in England, which has the second highest tides in the world. So growing up, I was always very influenced by the river and the beautiful mud banks. And sometimes the river was empty, and sometimes it was full. So mud is one of the main materials I've used in all my artistic life. Another mud work in a building made by Norman Foster in New York. It's called River Lines, and I mixed the mud from my local river Avon in Bristol with the mud from the Hudson River. And I like the idea that both rivers flowed into the same ocean, the Atlantic. So sometimes I have the opportunity to work on a beautiful grand scale. I often say if somebody gives me a great wall, I can make a great, powerful work. So again, that's another type of opportunism. So from a line in the Sahara to a line in an English country house in England. This is from the same exhibition. So that's slate, Cornish slate. That's exactly the same type of stones, but just laid flat. That's almost there. Circle of Life from a show I did in Palermo. So it's, a few years ago there was a group show in Jaipur in India. So this was the work I made for that, which is beautiful red sandstone, really hard. And actually, this is the work that I have now in my last show. I've just done. I made this work in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. It's called River of Stones. So this was on the same trip. We went down to the south of India to Kochi and we spent a week in the forest. And there'd been a cyclone before, so a lot of the trees had been sawn up to clear the forest. So there was a lot of sawdust. So this is my sawdust line, following a footpath in the forest. So that's red slate from upstate New York. That's from a kind of a sculpture park in the south of France, in Provence. They're river stones. So this is a circle on Mount Olympus in Greece. And after I made this, I wrote some lines. Gods in the clouds and thunder above, climbers and butterflies, walking to the plateau of the Muses, sleeping on the pine cones of Dionysus, losing the way at the end of the day, an old dog snoring beside my tent. Thank you.
You should get some water first. Well, Richard, this was amazing, and actually, you made it more difficult for me.
Of course I did.
To make a conversation after that. Okay, so I decided to have something to charge our talk. And I chose to meld the words of two thinkers. By chance, they are both Swedish. I don't know why. As an introduction, the philosopher Piet Hein reminded us that things we do take time, while physicist Bodil Jensen reformulated Hein's statement as thoughts take time. Not things take time, but thoughts take time.
Oh, sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe that your works are a fusion of both of them. Actions and thoughts both take time and are the basic ingredients of your art. And I think that I didn't know about the pace of your presentation, but this is, I think you performed it.
I did, yeah. Many years of practice. Anyway, you're right. So that was one of the big things that I realised, that when I realised that that a work of art could be a journey, that introduced the element of time. And then also space became distance.
Right.
So a couple of years after me making the line made by walking, I made a work 1,000 miles in 1,000 hours.
Oh, wow.
So
it really is very much, I think that time with you is a sort of a material.
Yes, it
you
is.
You feel
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and also when I was a very young student, I read Bertrand Russell's essay about Einstein's theory of relativity.
Yes.
Which obviously is time is a big part of that. So that got me thinking about all the different scales of the world and relative everything. Everything is relative.
That's true. The famous saying by Zen master Shunryo Suzuki, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts there are few. That could be a leitmotif of your work. Lines, circle, and spiral are among the forms you repeat throughout your work. How did you arrive at this specific vocabulary?
Well, I think I said the first time I used a circle was complete intuition.
Right.
I had no idea. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. But like I said, but once I had used my first circle, I understood its power and its universal
subconsciousness, like a collective
characteristics. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and like that second show, that second slide was that I can make thousands of circles in all different parts of the world, but every place in the world is different. Like every fingerprint is different.
That's right.
So I don't need to make huge, great, wacky, idiosyncratic shapes.
Right.
Because the circles do it much better.
Oh, that's a great answer. Cultural theorist Andrew Edgar has written that archetypes determine the shape of images, but not their content. Your work was once described as poetry in the presence of materials, rather than objects offering meaning alone. When do you feel that shape, materiality, and content meet?
I suppose they do in my work. It's not for me to say. Well, it's the meeting of the mind and the matter. It's always ideas, and I don't consider myself a conceptual artist, right, because I do all the walks.
Yes.
Although every walk is about a different idea.
Right.
So we can talk a lot about walking. It's universal, like it's what makes us human. We right. walk on 2 feet. But the text works, which I've not been showing you, they're all about a very particular and original idea.
Right. I have a question about your text works, actually, but I wanted to relate to that point that you said about conceptual art, that in some theoretical books you are related.
Of course,
somehow.
I am.
Yes, but I think, at least it was something that I thought towards this talk between us, that in conceptual art they say mind over matter, and I think that with you it's more parallel. They are in the same level.
Mind and matter.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, I'm not of that generation. My art has similarities with conceptual art and minimal art even.
Right.
I'm very close to the work of Carl Andre, which also makes work on the floor. And Arte Povera.
Right.
Poor material. I'm making art from nothing.
Yeah.
So I am of my generation.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, how do you describe the relationship between nature and culture in your work? Because, nature was described throughout the years as different things. It was like an energy, a power behind the universe. It was something eventually evolved with philosophers in the 17th century of something that is going as an exterior to what man is doing. Man is doing anything that is opposed to nature. But I feel that the relationship between nature and culture in your work is different.
Yes. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe people would just. I don't think it's romantic in the sense of like going back to nature in some romantic way. But then I think, but obviously I've chosen nature. I've chosen the environment as the arena for my work, and so I can appreciate that a young artist living in a big city. Most people live in cities, and so that's why pop art is popular, because it's made by artists who live in cities. So I can understand why some people might think my work is mystical or romantic, just because I have chosen the world outside cities.
Right.
What were some of the other points of your question?
But then the meeting of culture and nature is also when you bring work inside the museum.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, it's I'm making culture. Yeah,
yes.
I'm all. You know, the wandering poet Basho in Japan. He was walking in the mountains, but he was making culture by writing his poetry.
Right.
So, you know, I'm an artist, and I'm making culture as well as using the landscape.
That's right. So for that, I wanted to ask you that geometry was invented by the Egyptians to combat the result of natural phenomena. Every year, the Nile would overflow and flood the delta. This would erase the borders marked between one agricultural plot and another. So the pharaoh would hire land surveyors to redraw the field's borders, and these experts used knotted ropes to measure the land, creating shapes such as rectangles and triangles in order to determine the size of the lots. I found these actions similar to your artistic acts, both in terms of performance and in the sense of conducting a dialogue with nature rather than trying to overcome it. In addition, it would be interesting to understand your choice of geometrical shapes placed in nature. So how do you see the incorporation of geometrical shapes within the organic landscape?
Well, I think I explained why I use circles.
Yes.
So geometric shapes are man-made shapes.
Right.
So in a way, it's the best way to have a dialogue with the natural patterns of nature. But you started off by saying that the Nile, every time it floods, it remakes its course, which is so I like that. Nature is always changing itself.
That's right.
And so Mark Twain, when he was, I think he spent 20 years on the Mississippi learning his trade as a riverboat captain, and every year the riverboat captains had to relearn the shape of the river because it was completely different every year because of the floods.
Yeah.
So all that sort of cosmic change is also part of nature, and it's going on now with climate change. And
of course. Namjoon Paik once said that the culture that's going to survive is in the future is the culture that you carry around in your head. And one of your text works from 1992 contains the sentence, bearing a rock in mind. How do you bear the image and the material in mind, and how is this transformed to the viewers?
Well, it's a work I didn't show you, but it was a walk. One of the great things in Japan is the Ryanji Rock Garden, which is rocks, so it represents the continents.
Right.
So I made a walk. So it's a very literal idea that I made a walk, a winter walk in that region of Kyoto, literally with the image of the rock in my mind. So it was very, and then I started the walk and ended the walk at the same rock.
Oh, beautiful. And I think in Ryoanji, it's also very nice when you think about Zen gardens, that actually the rock is buried 2/3 inside the earth.
I didn't know that.
So when you look, my master teacher is here, Aryeh Kotz. Where is he? Here he is. I learned it from him. So when you look at in Ryoanji, you feel like it's growing, it's moving. So when you
it's a great garden. It's a great artwork. It's a great piece of philosophy. It's very poetic. It's many things.
Right. So when do you find it fitting to do a work in nature, and when do you decide to do a text work?
Just by that is decided for me in a way. It's a bit more complicated. Sometimes I will make a text work with a completely preconceived idea.
Right.
It was called Dry Walk, was made by walking from one shower of rain and the next and seeing how many miles that was. So all I had to do... But other text works originate from actually being on the walk itself. So again, I don't have any... I'm not following any fixed rule. Every work has its different starting point.
So if we take the viewer's perspective, on the actual site of the work, you are sometimes the sole viewer.
Yes.
Right, of the work.
Yeah.
The image is archetypical, and it is addressing our collective subconscious, though the work itself is performed alone. So how do you move between the general and the particular? Because you have an art...
What do you mean by the general?
The general, if you have a collective, something of our collective subconscious, like you had the labyrinth, or you have a circle, or you have a line, it's something that completely is related to all humankind. But you oscillate between something very personal, a personal...
Yeah, well, like I say, it's in, I'm playing with universal things in very particular and different places. Like I say, like every place is different, like every stone is different.
That's right. So Walter Benjamin said, to live is to leave traces. So your traces are temporarily in the natural landscape, but gain more permanence through the use of photography. It is the nature of photography to be selective, to offer partial views of a reality and only capture a specific moment, thus depriving viewers of the sense of the work's duration and its entirety. So can you explain the extension of the physical work into a photograph presented in the gallery?
No, so the work in the landscape feeds the imagination.
Right.
And the work in the gallery feeds the senses. It's not either or. They're complementary.
Right.
And I think if I only worked in remote places around the world and showed you photographs, I think that might be a type of escapism. You know, I'm interested to show sometimes real stones in a real gallery or in a museum or wherever. So I'm interested in all the different ways I can put my work in the world. It could be a postcard, it could be in a book, in a slideshow, in a big exhibition. But also, I like the idea that people, in some local farmer in Mexico, he can walk by one of my circles and he wouldn't recognize it as a work of art. You might recognize it as a circle or a man-made human sign. Or it could happen that somebody in Scotland could come across a circle and think that might be Richard Long. So there's all these different. So there's all these different layers of how art could be made and how art can be received in the world.
Right.
And it's a very, very rich, huge different possibilities.
So when we
so that's why I said, you know, it's just as important for me to make a work on Fuji above the clouds as it is for me to make a work, say, in a museum in Israel, for example.
Right. So we spent a few hours together today, and you told me that I'm so glad to tell this, that your mother called you an artist from the age of 5. So it's a serious mother, his mother. And we started talking, and you said that you had this fantastic art teachers that considered you as an artist from the very beginning.
Yeah, when I was 5 years old, I had my own easel. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And you told me that in school they gave you to do a mural?
Yeah, when I was about 15, I think, yeah. On my own, coming in the summer holidays, 45-foot mural on my own.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, no, my art master, he only gave me one very good piece of advice. He said, put the horizon high. Because if I put the horizon low, it would have been all sky.
Right.
So anyway, so that was he trusted me to make this whole mural on my own in the summer holiday.
So what triggered you? So this was actually a work with paint. It was a painting.
Yeah, and I would in every school I went to, I always used to paint the school scenery for the school plays.
Right.
So art was my language right from the very beginning.
So
when people ask me, when did you decide to be an artist? I say, I never did decide.
I was just born this way. Yeah. So what triggered you to go outside?
I told you at the very beginning, I had a feeling that the world of eclipses and rainstorms and hurricanes and rivers and tides had a fantastic, gave me amazing opportunities to harness for my art.
Right.
As subject matter.
Yeah, it was also the subject matter of your painting. When you told me it was a landscape also.
Yes, the first one, it was the seascape,
right.
Coastal views.
Although you have stated that the wild, empty landscape is your love, during COVID, you explored other terrains. So could you tell us about this experience?
Well, we lived down a little country lane in England, so I didn't actually change my way of working so much. I just walked around in my local area. And it's like a sort of labyrinth of footpaths. So part of me, the benefit of me being an English artist is that we have national parks, which the land belongs to everyone. We have the landscape, even the farm landscape, the rural landscape, is full of public footpaths.
Right.
So it's in a way it was a great place for me to do my particular and country lanes. There's the whole category of my art is like walking down country lanes, right, which I was able to do in lockdown. I mean, the big difference, once I was doing one of my straight 100-mile walks in America, and I thought Montana would be a good place. Right. The prairies of Montana. And on the second day, a farmer came out from at an angle, and he said, if you keep on walking, Sonny, probably, that the next garden, the next farmer and the next property could shoot you dead, perhaps. Because the Americans have this different idea of ownership of the land. So I crossed over the border into Canada, into Saskatchewan, and did exactly the same walking a straight 100 miles, and it completely, was in the Canadian different philosophy.
Right.
The land, is no big deal, belongs to everyone.
You just answered my next question. If you ever did a walk and you didn't do a work, and they just prevented you from it, I guess.
No, no, not really. I mean, sometimes I've been prevented by doing a walk just because there's been so much rain that all the rivers are flooded, or many things. Or the monsoon can come early, and then I have to change the route. So my work is often also open to chance, and you know, it has to flow with nature.
Right.
I can't. I'm not the boss, really.
So,
but I also think that one thing that distinguishes my work from the American land artists, which were it was very American in the sense that they had to have a lot of money to buy the land, because it's about ownership of the land. Then they would make monumental works, and then they'd have to take the photographs from aeroplanes. So
That's
it was. So it's a completely different philosophy. It's more monumental, costs a lot more money, about ownership.
Spectacular,
Yeah.
and very conquering in a way.
Yeah. So I prefer to make a work of art which could be 1,000 miles long,
Right.
but doesn't conquer the landscape.
Becomes very poetic. The protagonist of Primo Levi's story, Led, from the periodic table, says of himself that he is neither a shepherd, a warrior, a hunter, or a peasant.
Perhaps he was an artist.
Yes. He says his trade ties him to the land, but he is free. And this resonates beautifully with your work, where you negotiate the relationships between the individual, art, and the natural world. And
well, I hope so. Not for me to say. Yeah.
Yes. So I just wanted to finish this part and say thank you very much,
right.
and we will take questions from the crowd. Martin. Martin Val was the director of the Israel Museum.
I would like to ask you for a personal question.
No.
I'm sorry, but I would like to ask you a personal question that has occupied me for many years. I used to be the curator of the sculpture garden here. I hope you have seen it. You walked around it, yeah. And afterwards, I became the director.
He was my first boss in Israel.
Okay.
This is why he
And afterwards, I became the director of the museum. During this whole period, when you and I were still young, I was very intrigued by your work. And I made many efforts over the years to invite you to Israel. And each time I was rebuffed. I was interested to have a work of you in the sculpture garden, but and the British friends of the museum were willing to obtain a work by you, but they were rebuffed as well.
This is all news to me.
And we tried to invite you. We had a program of visiting artists. We invited you to come and to do something here, maybe in the desert. Our calls were never answered, and it was not only me, it was afterwards also Susan Landau, who became the director of the Tel Aviv Museum. And There was it was a systematic rebuttal, and then people told us that your attitude was such that you were not interested in doing or having to do anything with Israel.
That's not true.
Well, the facts speak otherwise, and even though you went around the whole world, you refused to come to Israel. And I'm sorry that it sounds harsh, but it was harsh. And there were several artists who had the same problem like you had. They didn't know exactly how to digest Israel, but at least I had a phone line with them and I could talk to them. And some of them, let's say like Ed Kienholz, came and was able to change his mind by coming over. I'm sorry, I'm not insulting you, but I'm wondering what happened with you all these years that you found it difficult to have a relationship with this country and our museum and what we were doing. Later, when we made a big exhibition about the garbage mountain, major artists were invited, like Vito Acconci and Mark Dion and Tsai and Meryl Euclid, who's sitting next to me. And we invited you as well. And again, there was no answer on your end. So I wonder, Mr. Long, what is it that changed your mind to come here? I hope it was not only a financial incentive.
No, no. Well, the only, I must say I'm not a big fan of sculpture parks. I think, I mean, if I have the whole choice to make art in many different landscapes around the world, for me, a sculpture park is neither in the museum or in the wilderness. So, and I think it's great that many artists can, they like sculpture parks, and that's fine. But it's not my category of art. But anyway, I'm here now, and I've changed my, you know, I didn't. Thank you. I didn't have a mind to change.
Yeah. It's not just that. I think Richard Long got today like the longest day in your life, right? Just from the time we toured so much, we went through cultures, ages, different periods. It was amazing, and for me, it was very fulfilling and learning. And we had also a talk with our conservation labs, which was fascinating, I think, for us to understand how modest an artist, so you see the crowd that you bring, how modest an artist can be, that Richard, we were asking about conservation issues and how the turf, we have turf bricks. It's called Turf Circle. It's from 1991. It's part of the Contemporary Art Department's collection, and it's a very beautiful and sensitive work. It's very poetic, and I told Richard that I remember it from different iterations in the museum, being here many years ago that I worked, and that we felt that although it was on the floor, it's a circle, and in the middle, there is something magical. It's not the same floor. And then we looked at the things, and Richard said, you know, if the turf holds, it's fine. If it deteriorates, so that's the span life of the work. And that was so poetic for me. and I respect it a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming, and it's been great being here. It's been amazing.
Thank you.